Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Chodesh Tov, Agut Chodesh. We are learning Mishna Nazir, Perek Daled, Chapter 4, Mishna Zay, Mishnah 7. Ha'ish Megaleach al Naziris Aviv. A man, literally translated as can shave, but it means a person can bring, when he concludes his term of being a Nazir, and he brings his karbanis, which is accompanied by cutting his hair, he can be, so the term megaleach means he brings his sacrifices. He goes through the whole process. At the end, he has to go through the whole bringing of sacrifices at the end of his term. He can do that on the Naziris Aviv, on the Naziris of his father, which means using money that his father set aside for himself, meaning his father was a Nazir, and his father had set aside monies to be able to buy the animals for the sacrifices he needs to bring by the end of his Naziris. And the father died before he got a chance to do so. So this money that has been designated for the father's sacrifices for the completion of his term of Naziris, the Mishnah says a man can use that. A man would be able to use his father's money. Now, but the ein ha'isha megalachas al naziris aviyah, but a woman who makes herself a nazira would not be able to use the naziris money of her father. This whole halacha of being able to use the father's naziris money is a halacha Mishna Sinai. It's part of the oral law given to Moshe, and the oral law was that a son could do it and a daughter can't. And what we say here is, and I'll read here from the bottom, even if the daughter has no brother so that she inherits her father's estate, she's the heir. Nonetheless, she may not use the money that he set aside for his Naziris offerings to buy her own Naziris offerings. This is because the halacha Mishna Sinai, that is the source for this law, specifies a son, not an heir. It's about a son. And therefore, it's got to be a son. It's not going to be a daughter. Okay. Now, this whole case is where he set aside money. Like we had this in the previous Mishnah. Typically, when you're going to bring an animal for a sacrifice, you sanctify it for whatever sacrifice you want to bring it for, and that's what it is. If you sanctify money and you specify the money is for this and this carbon, then if you take the money and you buy an animal, the animal gets that sanctity for that carbon. By a Nazir who has to bring 3 animals, we have already learned that he can actually just take money and designate it for the karbanos of a Nazir without specifying. And it's here where the money is not specified that we say the son would be able to use his father's Naziris money to buy the karbanos for his Naziris. But as they bring down here again in the bottom, in the notes, had he designated specific coins for each offering, or had he designated animals for his Naziris offering, all agree that the son cannot use the money or the animals for his own offerings. The law of Mishna Sinai was said only in regard to unspecified money. Okay?
Still alive?
No. Okay. Now the Mishnah continues. Ketzad. How is this? Meaning, what's the story here? What's the case here? Mi shaya aviv Nazir. His father was a Nazir. V'hifra shmois on the zirusay v'meis. And the father separated money for his Naziris and he died. The Omar, and then the son said, Hareini Nazir amanash galeach al me'ois abba. I am hereby a Nazir on the condition that I am allowed to use my father's Naziris money for my offerings. Meaning he's saying, when I'm making my Naziris, I'm making it with the intent to use that money that he left over. Now again, in this case, as the Mishnah said, the father died. And it's after the father died that he said, the son says, I make myself a Nazir on the condition to use that money. Amar Rabbi Yosi said, Hare elu yiplu l'nadava. These funds will fall for the voluntary communal offerings that we spoke about previously. Ein ze megalech al naziris aviv. This person cannot bring his karbanis using his father's money. Now, what Rabbi is saying is like this: this person, if let's say the son would not have said, I want to be a Nazir using my father's money. And the father was a Nazir, he had unspecified money, and he died. What would happen to that money? It would go for what's called Yiplul Nadava, as we had previously. The money falls for Nadava. That means there was a chest in the Beis HaMikdash where certain monies were put into there, and those monies were used for when the Mizbeach, when the altar is basically, it's not a busy day in the Beis HaMikdash, and there's no sacrifice being brought. They would take money from that chest and use it to buy voluntary Ola offerings, which were brought on behalf of the entire Jewish people, and that's what it means, Yiplul Nadava. So those monies that were not specified, as we had previously, when let's say the husband canceled his wife's Naziris, money that was already consecrated to be a Kabbalas Nazir, unspecified, and then there's no more Nazir to bring them anymore. That money falls to Yiplul Nadava. It falls to that chest. It falls to that purpose of buying the communal sacrifices to keep the Mizbeach, to keep the altar busy. Now, in this case, the father died. When he died, what happened to that money? What was now the status of that money? It goes for those communal for the Mizbeach. It goes for those sacrifices in the Mizbeach. Now the son gets up and says, I'm going to be a Nazir using his money. Too late, says Rabbi Yossi. Too late. You can't do it then. It already fell for, once he died, it was already now designated for the Nadava, for those voluntary communal sacrifices. And therefore, the fact that then the son makes himself a Nazir afterwards isn't going to help. That's not what Allah Sinai said, that a son can use his father's money to buy his personal sacrifices for his personal Naziris. So Rabbi Yossi continues, so who is the one that the Halacha Sinai said could bring the sacrifice, his Nazir sacrifices using his father's money that he had designated for sacrifices of a Nazir? Misha Yehuva Aviv Nazirim. Both of them were Nazirim at the same time. The father was a Nazir and the son was a Nazir. And then what happened is, V'hifresh Aviv Moi Stumim L'Naziru Soiva Meis. And the father then designated money, unspecified money for his Naziris, and then he died. Zehu Shemegaleach HaNaziris Aviv. That's the one who can now use his father's money for his Naziris. Since the son was already a Nazir when the father died, the father's Naziris money did not automatically become designated for communal offerings when he died. Rather, the money shifted from being designated for the father's Naziris offerings, being designated for the son's Naziris offerings. Since the son was already a Nazir, so those monies when the father died didn't automatically go for Nadava. He's got a son who's a Nazir. And therefore, those monies, now the wording that they use here is, rather the money shifted from being designated for the father's Naziris offerings to being designated for the son's Naziris offerings. Which sounds like when the son made himself a Nazir. So let me ask you a question. Let's back off here for a second, okay? Now, when this son made himself a Nazir, his father was a Nazir, and now he made himself a Nazir, right? Did he say, I make myself a Nazir, like the first half of the Mishnah said, on the condition that I can use my father's money? I mean, the man was alive. You wouldn't think that he did that, okay? You wouldn't think that he did that. And but the way they bring down here this commentary on this part of the Mishnah, the money shifted from being designated for the father's Naziris offerings to being designated for the son's Naziris offerings. How did it shift? Based on what? Just automatically? The son made himself a Nazir. The son never said he's using the father's money, right? But now the son is a Nazir. The father died, so it's automatic that it goes to the son now because the son's a Nazir? What if the son already himself designated his own money? So I'm not sure exactly how it works here when we say that in this case where both of them were a Nazir and then the father died, they explain here, it's not like the money went for a Nadava as it would if the father died before he became a Nazir, but rather it shifted from the father's Naziris to the son's Naziris. I'm not sure what that's based on. Is that automatic because the son is a Nazir? Or is it because the son did make some kind of mention of it when he became a Nazir? I'm not sure. But the point here is that in this part of the Mishnah, since both of them were a Nazir, when the father died, his son was a Nazir. So let's call at least that were a potential for the son to use it. So now it's not like that money automatically was going to Dava. It could go to the son. And therefore, the son would be able to use it. Allah Mishna Sinai there. That's what Allah Mishna Sinai said. The son can use it. Okay? So that's what it means when it says, Aviv, who is the one who could use his father's money for his Naziris? Yehuva Aviv Nazirim, both he and his father in Nazirim, Aviv Mais Tumim Nazirusay V'Meis, and the son then the father set aside unspecified money for his Naziris and he died. Aviv, that is where we say that the son can use his father's money for his Naziris. Interestingly, the Bartanura brings down that although the Mishnah seems to only mention Rabbi Yosef's opinion about this, the Gemara says there are the Chacham, the sages who disagree and say in both cases, even if the son wasn't a Nazir when his father was a Nazir, the son would be able to use his father's money for his Naziris.
They can disagree with the Tana?
It's other Tanaim who disagreed. Okay. Just not mention the Mishnah. Okay. Have a wonderful day. A good Chodesh Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi. What if it had been his mother?